Welcome to Prophecy Countdown with author and pastor Kenneth Baer. Join us every week for the latest updates on what the Bible has to say about the events, the characters, and prophetic signs of the return of Jesus Christ and His coming kingdom. Make sure you not only subscribe, but like your favorite episodes and share it with your friends. Now, on with the broadcast.
Welcome to Prophecy Countdown. I'm Pastor Ken, and welcome to today's Prophecy Update. Today's message is number 477, Betrayed by a Friend. Our episodes premiere on multiple video and audio channels on Sundays at 1 p.m. and then again on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. We welcome your comments, your questions, and any ideas you may have about future episodes. You can email us at prophecycountdownpodcast@gmail.com. So let's get into today's teaching number 477, Betrayed by a Friend. You know, betrayal is so common in politics. We see it all the time. Alliances shift, loyalties fade, and power often takes precedence over relationships. And we expect it from our politicians. But when betrayal happens to us personally, it cuts deep. A spouse breaking their vows, a business partner that steals from you, a close friend turning against you. You know, these wounds leaves scars that can last a lifetime. You know, history is full of famous betrayals. Julius Caesar had Brutus, a man he trusted, a man he counted as a friend, and he was the one that stabbed him in the back. His final words, "Et tu, Brute," or "You too, Brutus," were a cry of deep personal pain, not just a political shock. In American history, we have Benedict Arnold, a good friend of General George Washington. It was General George Washington that promoted him and gave him that prestigious position. George Washington had placed his trust in him, but Arnold secretly plotted with the British, betraying his friend and his country. While his treason was exposed, he fled, leaving his name forever synonymous with betrayal. More recently, President Trump himself felt the sting of betrayal when General Mark Milley, the handpicked chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, reportedly made secret calls to China without informing President Trump. You know, whether ancient Rome, Revolutionary War, or modern politics, betrayal remains a painful and unfortunately an unavoidable reality. Today, the title of my message is number 477, Betrayed by a Friend. And we're going to continue our conversation in the Gospel of Matthew. We're in chapter 26. And by this point, Jesus has had his Last Supper with his disciples. He had told them at the end of the supper that one of them would betray him. And then remember, Peter, ever bold, assured Jesus that it would never be him. But Jesus knew better. He knew that before the rooster crowed, Peter would deny him 3 times. Now, after the supper, Jesus and his disciples went to the Garden of Gethsemane at the foothill of the Mount of Olives, where he often prayed. But this time was different. Jesus was in agony. His soul was crushed under the weight of what was about to happen. The crucifixion was looming. He brought with him 3 of his closest friends, Peter, James, and John. He asked them to stay awake and pray with him. Despite Jesus' distress, they couldn't keep their eyes awake. They couldn't do it. They fell asleep. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. At the moment when Jesus needed them most, they let him down. Now, imagine Jesus. He spent 3 years pouring into his disciples, eating with them, traveling with them, teaching them. They were not just his followers, they were his closest friends. And yet one of them would betray him in the most painful way possibly. Matthew 26 verses 40 through 50 tells us what happened. I'm going to read this account. It's only 8 verses. Matthew writes, "When he," that's Jesus, "returned to them again, he found them sleeping, for they couldn't keep their eyes open. So he went to pray a 3rd time, saying the same things again. Then he came back to the disciples and said, 'Go ahead and sleep, have your rest. But look, the time has come, the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Up, let us be going. Look, my betrayer is here. And as Jesus said this, Judas, one of the 12, arrived with a crowd of men armed with swords and clubs. They had been sent by the leading priests and elders of the people. Their traitor, Judas, had given them a prearranged signal. You will know which one to arrest when I greet him with a kiss. So Judas came straight to Jesus, greeting, Rabbi, he said, and he gave Jesus a kiss. Jesus said, my friend, go ahead and do what you have come to do. Then the others grabbed him. They grabbed Jesus and arrested him. You know, Jesus had spent hours in the garden in agony, praying, knowing that this time was coming, the betrayal, the arrest, the crucifixion. When he returned to his disciples, he found them sleeping, too weak to stay awake. The very people he depended on for support were failing him, but this was only the beginning. Before he could even finish speaking, Judas arrived. This was not just any man. This was Judas, one of the 12. Judas, who had been there had seen the miracles that Jesus had performed. He had sat at the table with Jesus. He had been entrusted with the money bag. He was their treasurer. He wasn't just a friend. He was family. And there he was, leading an armed mob. He had already made this deal with the religious leaders. 30 pieces of silver, we're told. That's all it took to sell out the Son of God. And how did he do it? He did it with a kiss, the ultimate act of affection, now turned into the ultimate act of betrayal. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come with a sword or a dagger. It comes with a smile. It comes disguised as friendship. And then comes the most agonizing moment of all. Jesus doesn't fight back. He doesn't resist. He doesn't lash out. He doesn't even rebuke Judas. Instead, he calls Judas his friend. My friend, he says, go ahead and do what you have come to do. You see, even in betrayal, Jesus shows humility and grace. But let's get a closer look at the betrayal of Judas. This wasn't just a personal failure on Judas's part. Scripture tells us that Satan himself entered into him. This was the plan of the evil one from the beginning. In Luke chapter 2, verse 3, it says, then Satan entered Judas, called Iscariot, who was one of the 12. You see, this wasn't a moment of weakness or greed. It was demonic. You know, historians and theologians have long speculated about Judas's motivations. Perhaps he was trying to force Jesus into action to accelerate the establishment of his kingdom. Maybe they thought that by pushing Jesus into a confrontation with the religious and political leaders, Jesus would finally take his rightful throne. But here's the thing, regardless of Judas's reasoning, Jesus was not surprised. He had known this all along. At the Last Supper, he told his disciples, truly I tell you, none of you will betray me. You see, it was part of the plan. Judas acted with evil intent, but just as the story of Joseph, where his brothers sold him into slavery, what the enemy meant for evil, God meant for good, as it was in the story of Joseph. It's also the same in the story with Jesus. Although Judas's betrayal, after Jesus' betrayal came Jesus' arrest. Through his arrest came the trial. Through the trial came the crucifixion. And through the crucifixion came our redemption. So you see, betrayal never changes God's plan. In fact, sometimes it's the very thing God uses to fulfill them. Jesus' betrayal led to the salvation of the world, and why our betrayals may not carry the same weight of eternity, we can be sure that God is never surprised. God is never caught off guard. What others intend for evil, God can use for good. This is where we must pause and consider. Remember, my message today is betrayed by a friend. So what is true friendship? If we can be betrayed so easy, then what is a friend? If we look only at Scripture's examples of friendships, Actually, if we look at this, the scripture's examples of friendships, it's not always very encouraging. James 4:4 tells us, don't you realize that friendship with the world makes you an enemy of God? Judas's betrayal wasn't just about money. It was about choosing the world over Christ. And that's the decision we all have to face. Jesus tells us plainly that if we love him, our love for even our closest relationships, our mother, father, brother, and sisters, needs to look more like hate when it's compared to the love and affection we have for Jesus. Why? Because if we try to hold on to the world and to Jesus, we'll eventually betray one or the other. But even though the Bible warns about false friendship, it also upholds the beauty of true friendships. Proverbs 17:17 reminds us, a friend loves at all time. Ecclesiastes chapter 4 tells us two are better than one. If either the one of them falls, one can help the other up. This is the friendship God desires for us. Friendship built on loyalty, love, and faithfulness. And that's why betrayal hurts so deeply, because we know what friendship is supposed to be. Jesus experienced that pain, and so have we. But here's the thing. Here's the good news. Even when people fail us, Jesus never will. Jesus will never fail. Jesus never will fail us, not even once. He's the one friend who will never betray us, who will never abandon us. He'll walk alongside us. He'll never turn away those who trust in him. Now, betrayal is actually a part of life. If it happened to Jesus, it'll happen to us. But Jesus' response teaches us something very vital. Jesus didn't let betrayal define him. He didn't become bitter. He didn't seek revenge. Jesus fulfilled his mission. And because he did, we have the hope of a true and lasting friendship in him. That reminds me of the song, What a Friend We Have in Jesus. We used to sing the old hymns in the church that we had in celebration. And I love that song, particularly the second verse. It goes like this: Can we find a friend so faithful, who will all our sorrows share? Jesus knows our every weakness. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Amen, my friends. Hold fast to that truth. Jesus is the friend that will never betray you.
Nearly every day, it's common to see, read, or hear something about the end of the world, the apocalypse, or end times. Author and pastor Kenneth Baer's The Apocalypse and Coming Kingdom zooms in and breaks down biblical prophecy as it relates to Jesus' imminent return and the coming 7-year period, including the Great Tribulation. Available in both paperback and Kindle versions. Get your copy on Amazon or at Barnes & Noble and select Christian bookstores. The title again is The Apocalypse and Coming Kingdom. You can also find it listed by author Kenneth Baer. Get your copy today. Thank you for joining us on Prophecy Countdown with Pastor Ken Baer. Don't leave without first sharing the latest episode with your friends. Be sure to join us again for the latest updates on Prophecy Countdown.